Is this just a phase? I used to ask myself that question almost every day when my daughter was younger. She wasn't struggling in any one dramatic way, just a lot of little things that did not sit right. Maybe you've noticed something too. Maybe the way your child moves or speaks, reacts, or connects with other people just feels, I don't know, maybe a little off. It's confusing and no one's giving you any clear answers. But the good news is that you're here and you're not alone. So stay with me and you will hear me speak to a child psychologist who's helped hundreds of families spot these patterns early and figure out what to do next. Sitting across from me is Dr. Mandi White-Ajmani, a clinical psychologist and founder of Small Brooklyn. Together, we're going to break down 3 early signs, red flags, if you will, that every parent should know. You'll learn that getting the right support early can reshape your child's entire path, not just how they learn, but how they see themselves and experience the world. Honest stories, expert guidance, the path redefined. This is Parenting Pivot. I'm so glad you're here, Dr. Mandi. You've helped so many parents through this first confusing stretch, and that is exactly what we're hoping to unpack today.
Thanks so much for having me, Patrick. I'm really excited that you're doing this podcast. I actually think it's going to be a really great resource for parents.
Thank you. Thanks. That means a lot. You've worked with so many families. Do you find that sort of vague worry that something is not quite right is pretty common as a starting point?
Absolutely. I think a lot of parents come to me with similar sorts of reflections on their children, things that they feel that were off, similar sorts of questions, and they're really looking for, what do I do with this information now? So yes, very common.
Just within days of coming home from her birth, we realized something wasn't right because of she was sleeping a lot and not latching, and she was struggling to feed. So we had to syringe feed her, and it was a confusing time because she was a larger, healthy baby that the pediatricians didn't think anything was wrong. I thought I was failing as a parent, and something was wrong with me because it was my first time parenting, and why can't I get my child to feed?
It was really scary at first because it seemed to me like it had come out of the blue. It was isolating. I thought that I had mastered parenting, and then all of a sudden I had this crisis. And it was such an extreme crisis because she couldn't go to school anymore. It was very, very isolating, and it was really scary, and it was very traumatizing for me as well.
So should parents trust their gut when something feels off?
That is a really common first opener. When somebody calls me, they will say, I don't know if this is a problem. I may be overreacting, or I have talked to my pediatrician. I have talked to my teacher. Everybody says not to worry, that sort of thing. I say, 1, parents are the experts on their kids. You guys are seeing your kids in the most nuanced sorts of ways. You are seeing the patterns day in and day out. So you see that nuance in a way that the other very knowledgeable experts who are seeing lots of kids might not be seeing, and they might not be paying as much attention to the nuance as you are. They're not able to.
What I noticed that was different about my son as opposed to my other children, or just children in general, that brought me to understanding that he was neurodivergent, was we were on the bus, and he didn't want to be on the bus. He would scream and have all types of meltdowns, and he was barely 2 years old. And I just thought he was like having a temper tantrum because, again, he's a toddler age. He's my 3rd child. So they would just last longer than normal and screaming really loud and violent and angry. When I say violent, I mean like, physically, fighting with me and pulling me.
The very first time I noticed anything was different for my daughter was when she was in kindergarten. She spent a lot of time hiding out in the bathroom or hiding out under a table and doing her own thing instead of participating with other kids in the group. And this seemed to be quite different than the experience any other kid was having. So that was the first clue.
You know, at the end of the day, when someone is coming to me for help or to ask those sorts of questions, I can help walk through the sorts of characteristics that a parent is seeing. I can help shed some light on what is typical and what is not typical. Are they actually getting in the way of the kinds of development that a kid should be having at this stage? Those are the really important questions for parents to have. So you don't need permission to ask those questions. You should trust your gut. You should ask the questions. You should start noticing patterns. We have so much normal variation in kids and adults. This might be something that is still well within typical parameters, for example, but maybe is like a little high or a little low in that normal curve.
Is it helpful to like say, oh, I noticed this thing, and then like write it down? Should someone be Googling it, or should they just, did this happen on Thursday and then again on Tuesday? What is your gut feeling on that?
So your question about like, should I Google it? Google can be such a great resource. And then lots of times Dr. Google is going to tell you, no, your kid has cancer.
Dr. Google thinks everything is cancer. I have this itchy nose, cancer. It's like, should I trim my toenails? Maybe, but you've got cancer.
Yeah, so don't just trust Dr. Google. But your first thought about having a parent to write it down, I actually think that that's a really good idea. I think that a lot of times parents think that something is happening more often than it actually is. And so they write it down and they realize that maybe it's just really salient when it happens, but it's not actually happening all that often. Or conversely, they hadn't realized how often it was happening until they stopped to write it down. So actually, one of the first things that I recommend, you know, maybe even before you ask questions of a professional, is to start a little journal, is to just write down your observations about what are you noticing? What are your kids' strengths and weaknesses? What are the places where they are struggling and not struggling? I think actually a record like that to help you to notice the patterns can be really helpful.
If you have a child and something is physically wrong with them, like that you can see, you could go to your doctor and say, I can see that this thing is here. You can't see what's going on in here. So are there like some early signs that might indicate, I don't know, neurodevelopmental divergence?
Sure. I mean, first of all, don't assume that just because it's not visible that it isn't something that professionals don't work with all the time. So for example, doctors hear about pain all the time and you can't directly measure pain. And the kinds of psychological symptoms that your child might be complaining of or that you might be noticing are similar sorts of things. But in terms of just what to watch out for, we have big buckets of development in childhood. And so they are typically language, both receptive and expressive language. They are motor, fine motor and gross motor development. They are social, so connecting to other people and being able to both understand and express needs in a reciprocal sort of way. And then they are behavioral, having control over your actions and also being able to receive information from the environment. So let's just talk about those a little bit. The first is language. And so that is often a very clear sign for people. It's something that I think teachers and daycare providers and parents can all kind of agree on. Maybe their vocabulary is amazing and they can talk all day long to you about fire trucks. But if you try to have a reciprocal conversation, can you have a reciprocal give and take sort of conversation with kids? That's a little more subtle to pick up for sure, but it is a sign that something might be a little off, that they're mechanically, they can speak very well and their vocabulary can be extremely impressive. But then when you get into like the function of the communication, is it actually what you would expect for a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 9-year-old, that sort of thing? So language and also the nonverbal aspects of communication are very important.
I want to make sure that people can understand. I want to make sure I get it. So language, I get it. Something is off either in the way they're speaking or that they're able to communicate. Let's talk about the other things too.
Yes. Okay. So motor skills. Fine motor and gross motor skills, those are things that can be problematic and can be associated or typically comorbid with other sorts of developmental
So,
issues.
fine motor skills are going to be like doing little tiny tasks, right? And
Exactly.
gross motor skills is like how you're walking.
Sometimes a more nuanced sorts of problems there might be with how well do they combine the two.
I understand that we're talking about all these things, and some of the words you use, like comorbidity, it may not resonate. A lot of parents, especially the ones who are listening to this episode, this, these are new terms, and I've always hated the term comorbidity because it sounds scary.
It does. It's true. You're right. It's a very medicalized term. In this case, I really just mean that there are certain traits that often hang together.
When we're talking about gross motor skills, so that the people understand, we're just talking about big things like walking and maybe throwing a ball, but and fine motor skills are going to
Running.
be like drawing little things or picking things up and buttons and things like
That's
that.
right. And eventually you'll see more aspects of it in handwriting, for example.
Yeah.
That can be very laborious for some kids and it makes them really resist writing. So that's an important topic. But it tends to hang together with neurodevelopmental sorts of issues. When there is a developmental delay in motor skills, sometimes there's also developmental delay in other ways as well. We talked about language, we talk about motor skills. Social skills are very important. Obviously, being able to make connections with people and be able to get your needs met. And a stronger social relationship is formed when it's reciprocal. And so that's the give and take of a social conversation, but also a social relationship.
And these social skills, they're going to manifest differently. They're certainly going to manifest differently between boys and girls, and then of course between certain boys and certain girls too. So it's all kind of squishy there, isn't it?
Totally. And again, the abilities that are in the population exist on a normal curve where this much of the curve is a whole lot of variation. And it's only the parts on either side that you're particularly worried about. So if you have a kid who is like not that, reciprocal, but like good enough, like that's still under a normal expectations for a kid's age, for example. But it's not just about communication. It's also about sharing toys, sharing emotions, sharing information about yourself, and also interest in hearing that from other people too. That's the totality of the reciprocal relationship.
How would a parent use their common sense to differentiate between this normal variation, things that are different, but maybe when it's time to talk to someone like you?
This can be a particularly hard one for parents to pick up on sometimes, especially if it's an only child. And so they might not notice that a kid does not want to hear about the parent's experience. What you're more likely to see is in a peer relationship when a young kid is not having this give and take play sort of situation with another peer. That is normal to a certain age until about, I would say, by around 3, kids are starting to want to play more with other kids. A lot of times they're still playing alongside each other. And then as they get a little bit older, then they're starting to do more interaction.
What is your advice to parents who think like something is wrong, but I'm worried that this is just going to open this huge can of worms. And then I don't know, people are going to find out? There's got to be some of that too.
The can of worms fear, I think, is really important. And I think that it gets in the way sometimes of parents being able to ask these questions as early as they're actually feeling it. And what I typically say to parents is that whether or not you talk about it, the can of worms is already open. You're already having these questions and these fears. And a lot of times, depending on the age of the kid, they are already noticing that they might be different from somebody else. And even kids as young as 3, 4, and 5, if they have already noticed that there are some differences, they're starting to make some negative interpretations of why that is. And sometimes it's really unflattering for themselves. Like, I am stupid. I am bad. I am lazy. Sometimes they're parroting things that they're hearing from other people. And sometimes they've just come up with these sorts of interpretations on their own. So this opening a can of worms fear, with all the parents that I've worked with, that's never the dominant feeling at the end of the process, but rather it's relief that now I know what's happening. It might not end up in a diagnostic label, but you will get some information about what your child's strengths and weaknesses are, and then to be able to talk about that with your child when he or she says something like, I'm lazy, I can't get through this book, you can say, hey, you just need a little extra time to read that. And here are some of the strengths that you have as well.
I'm imagining my child or one of her friends or her cousins saying something like, I am lazy, I am stupid, I can't do this. And I have to say, it hits me viscerally. God, what would you give to make sure that your kid isn't feeling that as a self-identity? And to help them understand that, no, maybe you're wired differently, or maybe this is the wrong learning technique. It could be something really simple, or maybe you need glasses, like, who knows?
Yes. And I use that analogy a lot, actually, about, hey, you don't tell a kid, just try and see harder, in order to, you give them tools to help them do that. Being able to tell a kid that he's neurodivergent and not just lazy or bad or stupid is actually so relieving. And having kids believe that they are lazy, stupid, or bad is what leads to a lot of the more entrenched problems that neurodivergent kids and adults experience, because they end up with anxiety, depression, poor self-esteem. Sometimes they completely check out and they're like, why would I keep trying? Because I try hard and as hard as I can, and it's still never good enough. So why bother? If we can rewrite those patterns, especially early on, we see much better outcomes.
Is there one or two specific things a parent can do, like today? What should I do? Probably not ask Dr. Google.
Yeah, you don't have cancer.
Probably not.
I think the very first thing that you can do is take a breath and give yourself a break, because almost always parents, and I will say especially moms, will come in asking these questions for the first time saying, I did this to my kid. There's something that I did. I had that glass of wine when I was pregnant and I did this to my kid. Everybody, all the parents can come up with their own rationale for why they screwed up. So that is not true. You are doing the best that you can, and you are working with the information that you have. Second, I would say, I actually really like that journal idea that I had early on. Just the idea of, let's take some data. Thanks. When you do come in to ask your pediatrician or a neuropsychologist these questions, you can shift the conversation from, I think something's wrong, to, here's what I'm seeing. And now let's talk about what this might mean for his age. So you don't have to wait for a crisis or wait for the teacher to corroborate this or whatever it is. You can just start getting some advice in a low stakes sort of way and say, hey, this is just something that I'm thinking about. There's so many books out there. There are support groups. There are webinars that you can learn information, and that can really help you to feel like I'm not crazy. There are other people like me who are experiencing these sorts of things, and here's some of their strategies. I have a support network.
To me, one of the most important things you said is just like, take a breath, and other parents too. Like there are groups on Facebook. There are places you can find online to have other people to support you. How about this? You're at a cocktail party, you're off the clock, but a parent says to you, I had this terrible thing. So now you have a moment to give them a non-clinical bit of advice. What would you say to them?
Oh, that's a great question. I'd probably start with hey, don't be so hard on yourself. Tell me a little bit about what's going on. I'd probably just say, I am a mom too. I have absolutely had these thoughts before. My kids, I'm about to send one to college. So in some ways I am, not done by any stretch of the means, but I have covered a lot of the developmental stages at this point. And I can say with a lot of confidence that some bad things will pass and new bad things will show up. There's always, as soon as you get used to one stage of life, a new one will start. You will never know everything that there is to know about your kids, but you do have to trust that you have their best interest at heart.
Looking back at everything you've experienced, what do you wish that every parent knew in that first moment?
Yeah. I'm going to say again, maybe I should make this into a drinking game, but it is not your fault. Don't feel guilty about the things that you have and haven't done up until this point. I think that is number one. Number two, it is never too late. A lot of parents come in thinking that they have missed some critical window of opportunity to help their kids. And really, there is always an opportunity to help kids to better understand themselves, to better understand the world, and to have other people better understand them too. So number 3 is something we've also talked about a lot, which is to trust yourself. Trust what you are seeing, but also verify. Ask the questions. A lot of times you have the scenario that we've been talking about where maybe a teacher is saying everything is fine, but the parent recognizes that there's something wrong. Sometimes it's the other way around. Teachers are seeing a lot of kids at the same age, whereas a parent with a single child at home might not know what to expect at this particular developmental stage. And so a teacher has a little bit more expertise to be able to say, this is not quite typical of this age, and they will bring the information to the parents. So if a parent is already feeling like something might be off, sometimes the teacher really can weigh in on that to be able to help decide what to do next about it. But at the end of the day, you should be able to trust your own experience too.
How does one deal with the problem of one spouse says, I think something is wrong, and the other one does not? Either because they don't see it, or because they're not around enough, or because they really don't want to see it because of what they think it might mean.
Yeah, that's a really tough problem. And we do see that a fair amount. And at the end of the day, both parents do need to consent to having these questions answered by treatment professionals. I think it's really important to try and lower the stakes as much as possible to help the other parent to realize that just asking these questions doesn't mean that you are signing a child up to a lifetime of psychiatric medication, for example. Helping to get some clarity on strengths and weaknesses and not just a diagnostic label is very powerful. So sometimes that other parent who isn't ready to see it does recognize that there are things that are wrong, but aren't ready to ask the questions. And then sometimes they just don't really realize that there are issues. Parents can help each other to notice when they are having to jump through hoops, for example, to make a lot of accommodations for kids' meltdowns in ways that aren't really typical. Can help maybe put kids in situations where the other parent can see them with other children, see some of the behaviors that the one parent is noticing. Then also using that journal to have some data on, like, look how often our daughter is melting down when you need to put her in the car, that sort of thing.
Have you ever been in a position where the two spouses come in together and you're having the conversation and one is clearly saying, hey, something is wrong, and the other one's highly resistant?
I think it's really important for the clinician to try and have an idea of why that parent might be resisting. I am not just here to label their kid. I really want to understand. I really want to help. And if they can trust that that's the case, then a lot of times I can get to the parent who is resistant and say, what's the worst case scenario here? So we can talk a little bit about the fears. And then sometimes you can't resolve it in the room. I understand that they disagree, that I'm going to take that into account when I am looking at lots of pieces of data, because I will also be interacting with the child, doing testing, talking to the teacher, talking to other sorts of providers in the kid's life. I'm collecting many different data points so that I can try and weigh what's likely to be actually happening. Then I can give this information to a parent and say, here's what I see. Now you tell me, does this sound like your child or not? Most of the time, my experience is that even the resistant parent, if I have done my job well and really set this up so they feel like they are heard and validated, they will be able to say, yeah, I see it now. I see what you're trying to say. And I understand that this is not a death sentence or, a stigmatizing sort of problem. This is something we can get extra help on.
I just want to take a second to say thank you. But do you want to say anything about Small Brooklyn? Tell me about it, what it is, how you came there.
Sure. So I ended up with Small Brooklyn via a very circuitous route. I started out my career in research in neuroscience. And then after a few years of that, decided I really just didn't want to write grants for the rest of my life. And I actually really missed the very intimate aspects of helping someone clinically, family one-on-one. And so I started Small Brooklyn as a solo neuropsych practice in Brooklyn in 2013. And by 2018, I brought on 2 other neuropsychologists to help me with the referral stream, and it was wonderful. So I decided to open my own arm of therapists at Small Brooklyn. So we had a few therapists that way. I just kept getting wonderful new clinicians that sometimes I didn't even know that I was looking for them, and they ended up in my lap. And then sometimes I just decided, hey, we have a little extra space here in this niche that we need to fill. So it has grown and blossomed in ways I never expected, but absolutely love. So now we have 5 neuropsychologists on staff. We have 7 therapists. We actually work with people across the lifespan, all the way from babies around 18 months all the way up to older adults. But for the most part, we are really focused on school-age kids. But we also have this arm that I think is extremely effective, which is helping parents to understand how work directly with them can actually help kids too in both anxiety and emotion and behavior dysregulation.
Dr. Mandi, thank you so much. This has been incredibly helpful. And for those who are watching at home or listening, here are the 3 red flags to look out for as a recap. 1, we had language delays, especially around back and forth conversation. 2, we had motor skill challenges, both fine motor and gross motor. 3, we had social difficulties, like not showing interest in connecting with others. So if you guys at home are experiencing or noticing any of these, don't wait. As Dr. Mandi says, trust your gut and start asking questions. Early support can help reshape your child's entire path. So thank you, Dr. Mandi, again, so much. It has been such a pleasure.
Thank you, Patrick. I so appreciate being here, and I am really excited to see where your podcast goes. I'm really glad that you're doing this for families.
Oh, thank you. Big thanks to Dr. Mandi White-Ajmani from Small Brooklyn for helping us start strong. If she said something that helped you, like, subscribe, and share it. It really, really helps us. If you have a question for Dr. Mandi, drop it in the comment section below, and we'll try to get her back for a Q&A. Don't forget to head to parentingpivot.com to join the email list and stay in the loop. I'm Patrick. Thank you for being here with me.